Welcome to the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. My name is Jin Ong and I'm your host. I practice as an osteopath and psychosomatic therapist and am fascinated by the mind-body connection and how your physical body is a manifestation of your emotional state. I help people get unstuck from their chronic pain and live the life they want, grounded in values and driven by purpose. My aim is to create awareness to the underlying emotions behind pain, injury, and disease in the body. Join me to learn more about the story of your body, what different issues may indicate, how to release emotions so that you can prevent problems, as well as inspiring pain story interviews. Julie is a naturopath based in Melbourne, Australia, that has a passion for helping people with mental health and chronic health conditions. She's a strong advocate of psychosomatic medicine and the author of Your Body is Your Teacher. It whispers until it has to scream. Julie's approach is right up my alley. In her book, she covers how imbalances in your life, such as overcommitment and family trauma, is reflected as imbalances in the body and likely lead to illness. She covers real-life stories and links the emotions behind different issues, which I love because, like Julie's story today, sharing helps us learn and makes us realise we're not alone. I'm really excited just to explore your perspective on psychosomatic medicine because it's something that we both use with our clients and just day-to-day life, but it's really great to hear another person's perspective. And you've also been through some pretty significant life experiences. You've also been exposed to lots of stories through clients and those miraculous recoveries that people make. So, yeah, I think we'll just get straight into it. And let's start with how the second round of lockdown is for you in Melbourne.
Well, Jan, it's not fun. And, there's always positive sides on it too. So, we were lucky that we got away just before the second round was called and we were up at the snow. So we were very grateful to be out in Mother Nature before that. But it just made it all the more serious, I think, for everybody. And myself as a practitioner, I was wondering whether I'd have to go back to Zoom consults. However, we are considered an essential service as a naturopath and herbalist. And I just really noticed that a lot of my clients were having these very deep old conditions being stirred up, and a lot of anxiety and stress and worry about the homeschooling thing and just the serious nature of it all. So, it's felt a lot more serious this time.
How long is it for?
So 6 weeks. We're sort of more at the 4-week point, I think, at the moment. But the mandatory masks have made it, that happened last Thursday, and that's made it even more serious. I think just the discomfort and adjustment to wearing those and, not being able to sort of see people's faces and smiling at somebody and not really, learning to smile with your eyes. And, it just changes things when you're outside. And most people say that it's discouraged them to go out. So that's a way of maybe, keeping things less active out there. But, it's certainly just a different, a little bit more challenging this time around.
Yeah. I know something that they were talking about in New Zealand, but no statistics ever came out. And this is in relation to what we're going to be talking about today, but people's mental health and how they cope being in isolation. And this time around in Melbourne, it was quite quick. People didn't really have time to prepare for it. But what are you noticing in people?
Yeah, look, and I have a teenage daughter, so I've felt like, not that I want to have to prop her up, but I felt like her mental health has been quite delicate this time. Kaylee's in year 11, so year 11s and 12s do go to school. However, it's wearing a mask, pretty much on the school bus from 7:30 right through till 3:30, and then she also works at a fast food outlet, so she's wearing a mask there too. But just the lack of normal things, like when we look back at school times, we think about our social activities, our great times with our friends, and that is just such an important part of our mental health and wellbeing. And, her first football game was about to start on the weekend that lockdown reoccurred. was just such a disappointment because we'd finally seen some light at the end of the tunnel, and people are really finding it a lot harder. Our suicide rates are through the roof at the moment. It's always such a worrying thing, and it's not a normal situation, and that sense of isolation is very difficult to overcome, and connecting on Zoom and phone calls and things don't quite cut it. And of course kids are spending a lot more time on screens as well, so there's definitely a downside to, you know, trying to keep everyone safe in terms of COVID.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you are a naturopath. Can you just tell me a little bit about where you like to focus your naturopathy?
Yeah, well, I specialise in mental health and wellbeing and grief and loss specifically. Being a widow to suicide, I lost my partner when I was 21 pregnant with our son 8 years ago now. I'd already really had a great passion around an interest in mental health and wellbeing, but having lived through that traumatic experience really made me want to make a difference for other families. And some of my clients may be suicidal, but there's also the others that have been touched by suicide, whether it was a partner, loss of a mother, you know, fellow co-worker, whoever it might be. I just think, you know, loss is a normal part of human existence, our human experience really, and a lot of the times we don't have those sort of structures in place to talk about it or share if we're not particularly religious, or we're not in part of a church group, for instance. So I just feel it's a really important space to hold for people and normalise it as much as we can.
Yeah, definitely. It is one of those awkward topics, death, for people, where they don't know what to say or how to support someone. So I'd really love for you to share a little bit more about your personal experience.
I was 21 weeks pregnant, when I lost Scott. So, it was 8 years ago now. So he was a very type A personality, a PE teacher, very much loved, teacher of a private girls' school, and just a dynamic personality. So when somebody suddenly takes their life, it just becomes quite a shocking experience for everyone, and there's just this state of disbelief. Often we don't understand or can see, you know, visually see, even as a partner, the internal struggles that, you know, somebody might have. And of course there's that social stigma around that as well. And it's actually one of the topics that I covered in my book that I ended up writing after all of this happened, about society and sickness, and how, you know, some illnesses and conditions may be viewed or regarded or supported in different ways than, say, for instance, you know, mental health and depression versus, say, arthritis or something. So, but yeah, it was just it was a tragic time for all of us, but it really did make us realise that he had problems that were beyond the scope of his own control and ability to kind of cope with. And, you know, they do say that men can be quite thorough in, you know, these things too. And I say to his son now that it was a bad decision or a poor decision by a good person, because, you know, in the moment of grief and despair, somebody makes that decision, which is life lasting, isn't it? So
yeah. And so were you aware of his depression?
So Scott, so he was a family friend of mine, Scott and I, and we'd both gone through divorce. So when we were together, we got ended up getting together as partners. I did know that he had a history of just a little bit of depression and what have you, but not to the extent of suicide. So, you know, it does come out of the blue sometimes. And later I had discovered that he was taking antidepressants, but hiding the fact that he was. And as a practitioner, I always say it's your health, your choice. There's certainly nothing wrong with taking medication when our neurotransmitters and our wiring are just not working. And I'm a really big believer of not making our bodies wrong as well. And that also stands true for our mental health. When there is physiological discord, it's just such a shame to put some pride and stigma around that, because we might simply need some nutritional support, psychological support, and, you know, that imbalance can be remedied. It's just with great sadness, because I think it may have been able to be resolved.
Yeah. Because you're quite open about it, which is why I approached you to talk about this every year or throughout the year. I see you talk about mental health, and it is just one of those awkward topics, particularly for people who haven't experienced it themselves. So, what was it like for you, those early days of after he discovering the suicide?
I'm very fortunate that my daughter at the time went to a Steiner school, and we were part of a Steiner community. So the school community really got around us. You know, even the school principal being at the funeral and what have you, and we literally were given meals and community support and gifts and just visitations, like pretty much for 6 months. Me being a new mother with an 8-year-old daughter and then a new baby, it was like I was being held by the community, which, in times of tragedy, it's just so helpful to have people with you. So I think that was a big help. But there's just so much to go through. So in any, experience of loss, of course, you have the sense of disbelief, you have anger, you have sadness. So I really just believe in allowing all that to come and not pushing it away. And I think this is why I ended up holding a grief support group in my local community through my clinic, which was a free service, because the more we push, our discord away, the more, it comes up. And, this as a practitioner in our bodies, and the title of my book is, your body is your teacher, it whispers until it has to scream. And I know a lot of the people you've spoken to, use that comment because, it's like tapping us until it's in our face. So I really wanted to be able to let the grief and loss and all of those emotions go through me and again, not make it wrong and just be with it. It was certainly very difficult. And I did, seek help with counsellors and what have you, and, using all my resources in terms of herbal medicine and, Reiki and lots of other modalities as well.
Mm. What would you suggest to someone who is supporting a friend through grief and loss?
It was interesting that along the way I just no longer wanted to talk about it or be told that I was being strong or also have to deal with other people's emotions. So if somebody asked me about my situation and then I had to share with them, they may cry or scream or say, oh, how terrible or what have you. So now that I know that, I try not to sort of put value judgments or anything like that on anybody else who might be in that situation, and just really hear them and try not to sort of put my own stuff onto it, because it's so difficult when, somebody who is in that grief state to be dealing with their own emotions, let alone somebody else's. So it'd be very honouring just to allow them to have their thing and try to put your own things to the side. And it's okay, because we're all human beings and just trying. So, and if it's coming from a loving space, of course, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, I'm more observant of that now.
And because you were pregnant at the time, what was going through your mind?
Yeah, the greatest concern, of course, was for my baby and keeping things as balanced and as calm as I could in such a difficult situation. And so I did really call out for help. So, for instance, friends who could give me massage or could help me with Reiki or any other kind of external support. And really, I am such a go-getter and a person who's very independent. Then more than anything, I learnt to ask and to actually graciously receive the support of others, because going into the labour, I was concerned about, then facing all my loss and anger and feelings again as I saw this baby who was literally a spitting image of his father. So it was really important to look beyond myself and know that I didn't have to do this alone, and that while I was enough, it was okay to ask and really just seek as much support as I could.
How do you cope with, it's Liam?
That's right, yeah.
How did you, I guess, cope with those early days and him growing up? What's it been like?
Yeah. Bittersweet in lots of ways. When he came out, he just looked like his dad, and We didn't actually know what the sex was when I was pregnant. Scott didn't want to know. He wanted to keep it as a surprise. But when we lost him, his family and I, extended family and I, agreed we would find out whether it was a boy or girl. So we already knew it would be a boy. So it was almost like a gift from, the heavens that this piece of Scott was coming to the world. So he really was, in a way, a healing source of healing for everybody, the grandparents, the sister, the uncles and aunties, my own family as well. But it was so difficult because, every time I saw him, I would just wish that his father was there. And, it was just a big process of allowing all of those emotions again to come. But we made books about his father. We got, family photos. We got all the heirlooms. We put things together so there was a real story for little Liam Scott Jr., who's never met his father, to be able to see as time passes. And also it was really important for me to reach out to other groups. So there are suicide-specific counsellors that are free, a free service. They would come and see me at my home. There are terrific suicide support groups for family members and it normalises it then. I actually ever met another woman who had lost her first baby while her husband suicided. And so I knew that I wasn't alone, that, because you feel like this freak almost, that, you're in this very strange situation. So I had other people to normalise things as well, which was really important for my own mental health, in supporting not only my new baby, but my daughter who was 8 at the time.
How did Kaylee cope with it?
It was really hard for her, particularly at the funeral. I remember her just breaking down and the whole school literally just surrounding her, which was really beautiful. And the school were very good at helping me get her to school when I had a new baby, talking about her dad because he'd been at, school working bees and what have you, and showing Liam photos as he was getting bigger. But just it was really important also for me to get a counsellor for her that was, particularly at the time that it happened, who specialised in grief and knew what were the right things to say to a child in these circumstances. And I really had her held with close friends for 24 hours before I could get that information, so then I could manage her as best I could. And it's just about normalising it. Even now, Liam asks questions. He continually asks questions about why his daddy was sick or what happened with his brain to make it stop working. Why isn't he on the planet? So just also really finding resources. There's some terrific books out there that, there's so many other families in the same boat, that you are not alone, and that, there's just so much there for you that can help not only you but your children as well.
So you've also written a book that was partially inspired by this experience, and there's a chapter in there called When Our Bodily Dysfunctions Become Unmanageable: Scott's Story of Chronic Pain, Food Intolerance and Depression, How They Simply Got the Better of Him, and Why His Suicide Forced Me to Consider Do What I Want to Be a Warrior or a Warrior.
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
Yeah. Well, when our body stops us and our physiological conditions overwhelm us, and this is what happens, I guess, at that brink of depression where there's no ability to dream anymore, there's no light, and it just seems like you're going down like the sink, and it's a current that you can't kind of quite work up against. So it was just such, I really wanted to make a difference after Scott's story, and I see it in clinic as well where clients are battling, and yet it's so important to intercede at that point, because some of my clients, for instance, have had anxiety, managed anxiety since, say, for instance, they're adults now and they've managed anxiety since their parents divorced, and they've been on medication, and it's just something that they've learned to live with, this pain and upset and imbalance, whether it manifests as panic attacks or not being able to drive the car, or wetting the bed at night because you've got terrible tremors and nightmares. And yet if we are able to support people at that point, they're actually able to really turn around. And one client in particular was able to wean off her medication at her choice and in her own tempo. She really had to call the shots there, and I supported her with nutritional support and herbs, and of course she had some counselling. but he was a woman who was, had primary school age children, and she was able to not only overcome all these difficulties in her home life, which were impacting her ability to parent and work. She was then able to get a job and study and get off her medication, and her whole life changed, and it really did prevent her suicide. And that would have otherwise been another loss to somebody precious on this planet. So, and it's about dealing with chronic pain. For instance, Scott had chronic back pain. He did have food intolerances. It made it very difficult to sleep, to eat, and when things just become too much, of course, that's when, what do you do? So it is so important to not make our bodies wrong as a starting point and seek help, because, if only I'd known that these things were piling up on him to be overwhelming. I really wish I could have interceded, and to be able to do that now in clinic is just so rewarding. But it takes time, I say for every chronic condition you have, for every year that you've had it, it may take, an equivalent of a month to help resolve those underlying drivers. So if, you've had back pain for 5 or 10 years, it may take 5 or 10 months to get some real results. So we have to be committed, and the time has to be right. And I know that you see that in clinic, Jen, where, we have to be ready and take some ownership. And, disease and pain does make us look inside ourselves, and our body hears everything our mind says. So if we're telling our body it's wrong, at some point we make ourselves wrong, and it's really heartbreaking, because it could just be a discord that really can be rectified, whether it's with medication, whether it's with nutraceuticals, body adjustments, and what have you.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point that you touched on, is that it is okay to have medication if you're really at that crisis point, to try and get things back under control. But then there is a possibility of coming off it, but to make sure that you seek support and advice, because it often is a long road to get off medications like antidepressants. How have you found inspiration from this experience in your life?
It really has inspired me mostly to understand that everybody has their struggles, and it's just so many layers to it, and I think I've been through so many years of crying as well about, the what ifs, and, you just desperately want that person to be back again. And so all you can do is make sure that you honour yourself and your body. And I'm so grateful for everything, every bit of functioning cell and wiring and whatever is happening in my body at any given time. And it's a bit of a habit I have when I wake up first thing in the morning, is just to check in and be grateful, because, I've seen the other side where somebody has actually made their body stop working because they're just dealing with so much pain. So I think that's really important. And as a practitioner, I think, I use my pain in a way that can hopefully be of service to others. But of course, I still have my own struggles as well. So I know now to ask for help from other, practitioners, and exactly, there is nothing wrong with medication. In fact, it can be life-saving. And with some clients, I might even encourage it while managing them with the cofactor nutrients that will help ensure that you're not depleted and that you are in the best possible space you can be, because sometimes we do have to soldier on, we just have to get by with each day. And now with such worldwide, extra stresses and pressures on us and uncertainties, probably now more than ever, I would really encourage people to honour that in themselves, go gently. Our beliefs impact our recovery too. So I think for my own mental health and recovery from the loss of a dear loved one's suicide, I have to really manage my own mental health and the inner dialogue, and make sure that it is kind, self-supportive, nourishing, and not debilitating, because, we are number one, aren't we? Unless we care for ourselves and tend for ourselves, we can't be of service to our family and friends and loved ones in our community.
Yeah, absolutely. And what is the process that you go through when someone approaches you with anxiety, depression, or suicidal thoughts?
Yeah, I ran a webinar on natural approaches to mental health a couple of years ago, and I still go back to those foundations of, first of all, the main message is to not make our body wrong, and then assess any nutritional deficiencies, because if our neurotransmitters aren't able to function the way they ought to be, and it's really important to look at, there's certain questionnaires and assessments I can make in clinic just to see, right, okay, so this neurotransmitter is not working and this impacts this one and this what impacts this one, and suddenly the person understands why they might have an addiction to carbohydrates or a low pain tolerance, or just desperately wanting to drink alcohol all the time. So
Can you cover those neurotransmitters?
yeah, there's so many of them. There is a long list of our neurotransmitters, but if we can ascertain which one is in a higher level of discord or dysfunction or deficiency, there are key nutrients we can give our body that will actually address that imbalance. So whether it's phenylethylamine, for instance, or GABA, there's so many of them. So serotonin we know and talk about a lot, and a lot of these neurotransmitters exist and are replenished our gut microbiome, so that gut mind connection, and really supporting our digestive health as well. We're all born with commensal bacteria, and they can be very compromised, and this impacts our brain health so much. The gut mind axis that everybody seems to talk about, and it's definitely the main theme of my book, is that body mind connection and psychosomatic medicine, and how much impact our thoughts and our brain have on our overall well-being and our overall functioning, really.
Yeah. Can I ask you specifically about a few neurotransmitters? So I'm interested in serotonin, dopamine, GABA, and maybe there's a couple of others, but could you take us through them and how high or low levels can affect us? Because you talked a bit about addiction as well. So I find
I'd probably need my chart out just to read them all, because there's a long list. So, but exactly what you said is that, if we have an imbalance in these, there are so many other impacts. So it's like, peeling the layers of an onion, or the inner mechanisms of a clock where, certain cogs are turning around and the other cogs can't work. And I think those visuals are really important to see, because now the penny sinks that, oh gosh, right, so I'm having this addiction or desire to eat carbohydrates. It's because there is a neurotransmitter imbalance in my body. Therefore, then I'm, eating foods that are impacting my mood. Then I'm actually giving some self-talk saying that there's something wrong with me, and then it impacts my energy and my social life, my schooling, my work, and what have you. So it's just like the ripples in a lake that just keep, tinkering out. And, if we could come back to that source of that initial rock falling in the water, we've got so much more power. And it really does excite me when I can make these assessments for my clients, because suddenly they realise that it's not them, there's not something wrong with them, it's a discord, it's an imbalance that can be rectified, and slowly but surely we can remedy that. And with serotonin, it is, we do get synthetic serotonin in our antidepressants, but there's so many other neurotransmitters at play. So if we are just providing one to the body and the brain, it can put out of whack the other ones, and suddenly we're dealing with another problem. And that's why we might have side effects to our medication, which was really aimed to work for one particular outcome. And unfortunately, we're not told that certain medications particularly antidepressants, may only have a work in one in two people. So 50% of people, they may not work. And then suddenly you make yourself wrong again. So it really, really, really does help, whether it's a really terrific community pharmacist or a GP or allied health practitioner that you can speak with, just to find out if there's other nutrients you could take that can optimise those medications. I've worked in pharmacies for over 20 years as a practitioner, so I know that there's great power in doing that. and then you've got the best playing field for you, and of course it may take some time to wean off if you want to, but it's certainly possible.
Mm. I used to work in pharmacy for quite a few years, and I think the pharmacists are a wealth of knowledge, and you can go and chat to them for free, especially around medication when things aren't working out for you. So that's a good point that you've made.
Absolutely, yeah. There's some really good ones out there, and they are the hub of the community. They know so much because they see it every single day. It's a
Yeah.
really great free resource.
Yeah. So apart from consulting with people and giving them dietary advice around their neurotransmitters, what else do you usually suggest people do to help with their mental health and well-being?
There's a lot. So, yeah, first of all, we'll start with the nutritional stuff. I certainly do co-manage clients with, whether it's a psychologist, counsellor, gestalt therapist, whatever their choice is. So, but I can work with the wiring of the body, and it's really important for them to get any of the other help as well. We do also look obviously at nutrition and diet, because food is medicine. So what we're eating, and there can be food intolerances. I'm actually conducting a food intolerance test on Friday with a client. If we've got leaky gut, that is a huge impact on our brain health. And we're not really actually realising that there's a particular food that we're eating that can be aggravating the situation. And I talk about food intolerance in the book as well, because it's often not something that we can pinpoint, and even if we've eaten an aggravating food, weeks later we may be seeing the symptoms. So that's a terrific source of support as well. And then the social stuff, I think that is the biggest part, and that's why I ended up running the grief support group. And now, just before this lockdown happened, I was about to run a new group for chronic illness sufferers, because anyone who's living with a chronic condition, or any of their friends or family, know that it's not a daily grind, but it's something that's quite a big task. And having that support and having people that understand you in that. And a lot of my clients do have chronic conditions. So finding, and it can even be, a Facebook group like your terrific group, Jen, where you can talk to people who understand and can relate. I've had a scary health condition in the past, Guillain-Barré syndrome, with partial paralysis, and they really thought that it could be fatal. So now I'm part of those groups on Facebook, but even Epstein-Barr virus, glandular fever, you could find a support group for that. There's a lot out there for us, and we can do that in lockdown. We can do it whatever country we're living in. I see those real benefits, because suddenly you're talking to people who are your tribe and understand you, and it's just the same for mental health. There are so many people out there with panic attacks, bipolar, any kind of other mental health discord. There are people that are in your shoes and get it, and trying to lead their own lives as well. It's so important to normalise it and know that you're not alone. There's no need to be an island, and that's the biggest part of depression. It tricks you into feeling that it's just you, and that's one of the critical points, just reaching out.
Yeah, I always encourage people to speak up, speak to their friends, speak to their family, because that's probably one of the big things that I notice around suicide, is that people say, if I only knew,
Yeah.
how could I help them? And
Horrendous.
why didn't they tell me?
Yeah, that's exactly what we felt. And the bittersweet story was that I'd found an engagement ring in one of Scott's suits, and he wanted to propose marriage on New Year's Eve, and I didn't know. And and then you look back and you think, oh gosh, and you hear so many stories of people being stopped from jumping off a bridge or what have you, and it's just that critical moment where somebody just heard them or gave them a moment, and was just present with them. You don't even have to say anything, just to be present.
Yeah.
Really powerful.
Yeah, yeah. And just on when you share or you ask questions or you just be vulnerable, when you work out that there are other people in the same situation as you, you don't feel so alone.
Absolutely. And that's what it's about, because our mind tends to trick us, whether it's ego or whatever you think, whatever label you put on it, darkness or the monkey mind. Suddenly we have this inner dialogue that is telling us that we are the cause of the problem, and if only we were no longer here, things would be better. And Scott had 2 other daughters, so it was tragic for them to lose their dad. And there is a ripple effect, and it's very raw and scary to hear. But like, his sister had 3 young children, and she contracted breast cancer after his death. She greatly believed that it was the loss of her brother that just gave her so much grief that impacted her health and well-being. She couldn't sleep. She had 1 baby that needed to be breastfed. She didn't have time to mourn. And sadly, we lost her as well 2 years later. It was stage 4 cancer. And, you know, now his parents have they've lost 2 adult children, and they struggle as well. So it really does leave a lasting legacy on everybody, and you are valued. You are everything to your loved ones, and you know, whatever the stories and whatever the arguments or whatever situations and scenarios. Even Scott's ex-wife now, you know, is bitterly sad because he's no longer here. So it's just, if there's any other losses we can prevent, it is just so important.
Oh, it's really powerful work that you're doing.
Yeah, thanks, Jen.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your chronic illness that you came down with? When did that come into the mix?
Yeah, so Guillain-Barré syndrome is sort of a post-viral syndrome, so where your white blood cells are multiplying and sort of almost attacking the body, a little bit of an autoimmune undercurrent to it. But I was 27 at the time, so it was 1998, and I'd been travelling all around the world and surfing in various river outlets and crazy things, eating all sorts of stuff. So perhaps it was the immune component came in there. I came back to Australia and was very unwell. I woke up one morning and felt like I had pins and needles in my legs and couldn't feel my legs. I lived by the beach side, so I dragged my body to the sea and the sand and tried to do yoga and tried to swim, and I couldn't actually physically move. So had a friend drive me to the doctors, and the doctors said, sent me to the ambulance into a hospital, and it was Guillain-Barré. So what this condition does, it paralyses your extremities, usually starting at the feet often, and it can move up the body. So mine was right up to my hips, so I was partially paralysed. You could put needles and pins through my legs, and I couldn't feel them. I was wondering whether they were even in there. Of course, that makes you wheelchair bound. You can't go to the toilet by yourself, what have you. So if it does carry on and progress up towards the lungs, of course, it can be fatal. So I was hospitalised for about 3 months and frightened. It just frightened the wits out of me. It's the first time I've ever seen my dad cry. I was a very active person, and the hospital window had, you know, a lovely view to the sea and people surfing and swimming and out boating, and I just wished and wished and wished for my body to be right again. There was a lot of grief involved. There were a lot of MRI investigations, lumbar punctures, lots of schools of medical students around my bed who just didn't know or have a cause, a known cause or a solution or treatment. And I just started to realise that perhaps I needed to look at the direction of my life, being my legs. Where was I going? Perhaps there was another component to this. Being so determined, I asked somebody to bring in the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying because I really felt like part of me was dying, and tried to sort of take it into my own cause. I wasn't a terrific patient. I was dragging my half-limp body down the stairwells and trying to make myself walk and refusing to eat the hospital food and what have you. But there weren't really any solutions in hospital, and eventually I contacted a great aunt who is a witchy-poo herbalist in country Victoria, who makes a lot of green ointments and wild crafting herbs, and asked for her support. And I ended up discharging myself from hospital the 3rd month purely because I wasn't really getting better. And over many, many months, I did end up getting more feeling back to my legs. And to this day, they're not as strong as they could be, but I am fully walking and functioning like anybody else. But it is a really frightening condition, and, you know, you can Google it and there's so many videos of people who are really struggling. So I am one of the lucky ones, but I was determined to meditate, to do yoga, to really assess where I was stepping forward in my life. And I really, truly believed that there was I just researched Olympians and how they imagined their bodies back again. And it's one of the chapters in my book about peak performers and how their illness recovery and ability to manage pain is quite remarkable, almost like mind over matter. But there's certainly truth that our beliefs impact our recovery. And I had a friend who worked in a spinal unit in a hospital who dealt with people who were told they could never walk again, and there were a lot of miracles happening, and I was very inspired by that. So since then, that actually inspired me to become a naturopath, because I was a journalist before then. And, I ended up studying, and really did help me see that there's a huge component of illness and sickness that is controlled by us, and that on the other side of it, we have great opportunities to actually really make a difference to the physiological representations in our body with our mind and thoughts and our beliefs and our love for our bodies. And we have a great capacity to heal. So it's been a great journey since then, because it's certainly got me on my healing path. And I've worked in clinics all around Australia and country Victoria and coastal Victoria since, just seeing people change, overcome great debility with really, with a combination of, true belief in yourself and great help with people like yourself, Jen, where whatever it takes, and it takes a village. So sometimes you may want to see an osteo, sometimes you go and see a dietitian or a massage therapist, but whatever it takes and whatever resonates. And sometimes I see a Chinese medicine herbalist now, or TCM acupuncture. Other times I might get something else, but we are always healing, we're always growing. We always get sick. There's, plenty of other conditions I've had since then, and some of them are in my book, and there's a lot of stories of real cases by clients too, where that mind over matter actually really played true. And even in cases of oncology where it is a sad ending, there's not always happily ever after, where somebody may end up losing their life to cancer. It's more about how they met that disease or dis-ease and really honoured their bodies along that journey. It was really inspiring.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you want to share some stories?
Yeah, absolutely.
You've obviously put them in your book because they're pretty inspiring, but
absolutely.
What are some of the standout ones for you?
Yeah, there's a really fascinating one, and it's the chapter on how our grief manifests in our body, and the physiological effects of grief. So one of my clients, he had lost his grandmother. He was an Italian man. He loved his grandmother very much. He was very close with her. She was the source of nourishment and matriarch and loving and caring, beautiful nonna. And he lost her, and he was very close to her, and suddenly his sense of taste and smell disappeared, and he almost lost his sense of joy, really. And he came in to see me, and, from a purely physiological sense, there's zinc deficiency and what have you, but and we worked with a hypnotherapist with him as well. But it was interesting that his taste, his ability to taste salty and sour only returned first, but not sweetness. And isn't it fascinating that his just will to live really had gone? He felt so sad, so broken, really, that he didn't actually want to taste life anymore. And it took a long time, but the last taste sensation to come back was that sweetness of life. And he's since become a cook and what have you. But isn't that fascinating that, there's a big emotional component to his physical condition. And he got acupuncture and things like that too. But so that was one of the standouts, because he really turned his life around, but he could have, on the other hand, just stayed very sad and losing this actual ability. And, when you lose your sense of taste and smell, it's a huge thing. It really does impact your life. Not being able to smell things, it's really, it was. And not only that, it made him binge eat. He put on 30 kilos. So that's the reason he came to see me, and we lost the weight as well. But because he was literally not being able to taste anything. So
Yeah, maybe eating
fascinating.
more and more food just to try and taste something.
Yeah, and to self-nourish, but nothing seemed to be working. It was
Yeah,
very, very interesting.
wasn't filling the void. Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
What's
yeah,
another story? What about um, Epstein-Barr or glandular fever? I know that's
yeah.
a lot of teens get, and
It's a very common condition. Yeah, and that chapter was about a younger girl, and she was sort of in year 12 where it commonly happens. And what she had to do was literally take herself away from her family to heal, because it was almost like her mother had become so invested in her condition that it was impacting her mother, and then she felt guilt around that. And there's so many other stories, like one girl, young schoolgirl who had chronic rapid growth pain, so bone growth pain. So you would see this, Jen, where somebody has such rapid growth and they're very physically active that they have this, and lots of us have had it, bone aches and you can't sleep and you've just got this terrible pain. But they had put her on medication for attention deficit syndrome or hyperactive ADHD, so attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So they believed that she was being very disruptive in class, because she was, but she had a lot of other things happening. She'd lost her parents, she was living with her grandmother, and once we gave her bones the key nutrient they needed, which was vitamin K2, which is terrific for that rapid growth, bone growth turnover, and support her other physiological needs, they actually realised that she didn't actually have any attention disorder issues. It was because she was dealing with pain. So sometimes our symptoms are telling us something that we can't quite pinpoint or understand. And what I really loved about this girl is she was only, pre-teenage, but she was listening to her body and she was demanding people help her, because she knew that the initial diagnosis wasn't right for her. And it took a lot of courage and self-trust, which was really quite remarkable for a young girl.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think as parents, if we can only honour those messages and what our children are telling us about our body, and sometimes also putting it back on them and saying, well, it's your body. Now, how about you see? And I know with my daughter, who has a lot of reactivity to lactose and milk, she drinks it and then she's like, oh, I feel sick. And I say, okay, well, you sit with that. And it's okay for us to let them learn these lessons, because if they can't learn those vital goals of honouring their body, then that we may see at the other end where we've got later teens or young adults who aren't coping with life because they're dealing with pain or something, and then it will end up with mental health discord and, unnecessary loss. So really fascinating stories.
Yeah, I love getting the teenagers and teaching them to be a little bit more aware of what's going on in their life, or for anyone actually, but it is great to get the younger people to start to trust and listen to their body and create that awareness, so that they're not ending up in chronic pain or just relying on other people to tell them what's going on with them, or maybe getting misdiagnosed and treated for something completely different.
Very true. And that girl was the perfect example of that. And, it can be at the other end. One of my other chapters was a policeman, and, I was talking about sickness and society. He had addictions, and it was shunned by his family that he was overindulging in crutches, really, emotional crutches, to cope with his difficult workplace and personal life. But once he was able to honour that and stop the noise from outside and say, well, actually, I'm not coping, and find the resources he needed for himself, he was able to overcome his addictions to drugs and alcohol and turn his life around. And it could have quite easily been a slippery slope down the other way. So I'm really mindful not to make judgments as well on people's conditions and how we cope, or what we do to cope, because we spoke about it before. It can be a neurotransmitter imbalance. It can be, and once all of these things pile up on top of each other, it's difficult to get back to that underlying layer.
Yeah.
And that's why it can take time, say 6 months in rehab for somebody. It's terrific if they give themselves that opportunity, because that's what they need.
Yeah, well, in the scheme of things, 6 months isn't actually that long, especially
No,
when people are coming to you with 10 or 15, 20 years of pain and discomfort.
absolutely.
But for some reason, people do find it quite hard to commit to themselves and give themselves that time and space, invest in themselves financially to help improve their mental and physical state.
Absolutely. And there's always reasons, we're a parent, or we've got a job, or, there's always going to be those reasons. It's like, there's never a great time to buy a puppy.
Yeah.
Life doesn't go away, unfortunately, for any of us. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter who you are. So, and particularly for those people, and I do see a lot of shift workers and people in the defence and police force, because they have a lot of post-traumatic stress, and that doesn't stop today. I felt for those policemen who came to see me to have to give me the news that my partner had suicided. They knock on people's doors every day, and it can be any kind of workplace. You could be working with, abused children or what have you, and it takes all of us to make our community, and we live with these people. They could be our neighbour who isn't coming out in the garden or not collecting their mail, and maybe just a knock on the door, particularly now during the pandemic. And we don't know globally how long this is going to last and how it will look in each country. There might be, Victoria might be bad at the moment, but then there could be another place. So just really keeping an eye out for each other is just so important.
Yeah. I know that I have caught myself many years ago judging people and then finding myself in the same position and then realizing, I've got a total different perspective. And I think a big one is when you have your own child, you have a baby, and you then understand.
The screaming kid in the shop. I never forget when Kaylee was little. I was in a beautiful health food store in the Blue Mountains, and she was just like, "Mom, mom, 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 mom." And I was just zoned out. I was looking at the beautiful activated nuts or what have you. And the shop lady said, "Oh, for goodness sake, Mum." And I was like, "Oh, how rude." But, I would never judge people now, because I'm like, it's a grind sometimes. But, that happens in every workplace, and we carry that home to our families and what have you. So just actually noticing the level of stress, or, the stuff that we carry on our shoulders, and seeing tactile therapists like yourself and your team, where we don't realize we're holding this in our bodies, and to move it, you never know until you're on the table and you go, "Oh gosh, my neck."
Exactly.
I see an osteo. I literally see my osteo almost once a year, because it's always October. I see her for other reasons, but it's this chronic case where an old injury flares up, and it's because I've got the greatest amount of stress at that time of the year. And she says it happens to you every year, Julie. And isn't it interesting that there's almost a pattern? So to break those patterns too is so important. We have that in our wiring of our thinking, a pattern where we think, "Oh, it's me again. It was my fault that person acted that way. Oh, I'm not good. I'm not good enough. I've got mental health problems. My brain doesn't work properly." And sure enough, our body starts to show us that if we keep telling it all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like saying, "I've got a sore back, so I can't carry you to your child." And if you just keep on saying that over and over again, then your back will continually be sore.
Very true.
And I often notice that people say, "Oh, I'm fine, I'm fine." And then when they get on the table, as you said, they feel all the aches and pains. And it's going through those initial few sessions of a little bit of physical discomfort, and then they realize how much better they can feel. So I'm really trying to work on helping people get more of a preventative mindset. So we still get a lot of people coming into the clinic who they come in for pain and injury, they feel better, so then they stop coming. But that's actually where you can make the long-lasting change, is when you're not in pain, you can implement new habits and actually make a difference to your long-term health.
100%. So my favourite saying of all time is, "You don't need to be sick to get better."
Yes.
Because we don't have to have any particular problem at all. And it's another chapter in my book where a particular lady came to see me, and she just she finally had some time. She was a grandmother and a wife and a mother, and she said, "Oh, I'm not sure. I don't really have any problems at all. I just want to feel better and make sure I'm in good stead for my retirement." And in fact, we found out there was lots that wasn't quite right.
Yeah.
It's all relative. But she had life-changing transformations purely from just saying, "Oh, you know," and I really honour those people who do come into clinic and say, "I just want to self-maintain. I want to optimise my longevity and well-being and honour my body vehicle," which is what we all could be doing.
Yeah. And it really is about finding the right therapist who also has that mindset, because even in natural therapies, people are still very quick to go, "I'll fix your gut issues," and then you're on your way, and that's a success story. But I like to develop longer term relationships with my clients and be able to pick up when things are wrong before they can, and teach them that awareness in their body, because we're always getting signs long before we actually get the sickness, the illness, the pain, or the injury.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think one of the last chapters in my book is about your constitutional strengths and weaknesses and our genetics. So we can always improve those. I use iridology in clinic, and you'll have other modalities and ways of doing that, but assessing our clients' bodies. And I noticed that, well, you have this tendency in your lineage, whether it's lung health issues or arthritis or diabetes, but we can prevent it. So arming ourselves with that knowledge. And we are very fortunate that we live in an age where there's so much technology and assessment tools where we can actually ascertain, have a benchmark and a gauge and quantify where we're at right now, whether it's body mass index and how much lean muscle mass we have, or our bone health for osteoporosis. So why don't we draw on those? It's just a terrific way. And at the very least, just getting a full blood examination. In Australia, we can get that with Medicare, a free service from our doctor annually. And there's so much to be gleaned from there, whether it's our vitamin D deficiency, B12, thyroid, what have you. There's so much we can learn about ourselves.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that walk around knowing they have symptoms, but just keep on hoping that it'll get better on its own. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I just know now, after being a practitioner for 20 years, that it's like the car. You're driving the car, and my car's got a ding in it at the moment, and and there's things that are wrong with it. And it's like I can keep driving it, but there's going to be a point where it's just going to break down, and it's almost kind of living on a tightrope and a bit of luck, hoping for some luck. And it's until our body stops us. And sometimes, the body is whispering, whisper and whisper, will keep whispering, but then it will scream. And unfortunately, the horse is bolted by the time, if you wait until that time. And I do see it in clinic where I just say, they realise, I wish I'd come in a bit earlier. I actually realised my bowels haven't been actually very regular pretty much all my life, and now I've got hemorrhoids or what have you. And it's okay. Let's not make ourselves wrong. But what a terrific lesson and reminder that, and this pandemic's a great opportunity. There's a lot of benefits and lights and joys from this pandemic. We've slowed down. We're connecting with each other. Dentists have never been busier because everyone's got the time now and inclination. It's the only outing you get. Well, let's go to the dentist. We'll get our teeth done. So let's even use the pandemic as an excuse. Right, there is a worldwide health crisis or issue at the moment that we're concerned about. Let's make sure that we're in our best stead possible so we can really look after ourselves and our neighbours and our family while we're in this. What better time? We have to maintain ourselves. It's actually a responsibility. Health is wealth.
Yeah, so many people would never have given themselves this amount of time off, let alone even a week. And it can take weeks or months for the body to actually wind down. So I definitely know there's been lots of positives when we went through our lockdown, and maybe Melbourne people have to learn another lesson.
Yeah, that's right.
Going down.
Yeah, in our family, we've just put a big whiteboard up with just the positives of pandemic, and also just remembering too, we have friends of friends in the UK who are only in their 50s that did lose their lives to COVID. The wife passed away and with the virus, and then the husband sounds like he died of a heart attack, but it may be a broken heart because he didn't get to say goodbye to her. So it's just bringing it back to real people and just remembering that there's a reason for things that are happening. But certainly just, going gently. Let's just go gently and look to the positives. Let's look to what the self-nourishment opportunities are here. There's always, every day, just an opportunity to self-nourish and, self-care. Self-care is a really, really important place to start for every single one of us. We're all valued. There's only one of us.
Yeah.
It's really, really important.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Just to come back to the topic of mental health and suicide, because there are a lot of people all around the world listening in who will be going through all sorts of thought processes, what would you be saying to these people who are struggling right now?
Don't let it make you think that you are the problem, and please just reach out, because if nobody knows, nobody can help. And there's this whole thing of you don't want to burden anybody else, you don't want to let them know, and you don't even have to reveal anything. Now more than ever, we've probably got the good excuse to say, I'm not coping, or hey, I'm just feeling a bit weird today. It can be as simple as that. There doesn't need to be an explanation, or even asking, how are you coping? Yeah, I'm not, I'm struggling a bit, because every single one of us are struggling at different times, particularly this year, and it is so normal. And the great thing is that we are talking about it in mainstream media a lot more. There's, celebrities, and, everybody's actually admitting, and, we've seen, in America, there's a particular celebrity that's got bipolar who's really, his family are concerned about him. So it is normal. Every single human being has some kind of mental health issues, just as much as we might have an aching shoulder or neck. That is really normal. I think it is not, you're not alone. You are not alone. Yeah.
Do you actually get many people reaching out to you who are feeling suicidal?
Absolutely, yeah. And sadly, we've had, family members of clients actually suicide. So we've had one instance of a suicide in the last 2 weeks of somebody close to our circle, and this person has got, very close family members who just didn't see it happening. This person was quite a successful business person. And I actually see it when I go into rehab, drug and alcohol rehabilitation centres. It's remarkable, because we have a story that we think that somebody struggling with mental health issues might look a certain way or be a bit down and out, but it's, it could be a high-end successful, lawyer, or, it could be the lady at the kids' tuck shop who's, having a little bit of a drink behind the counter. It looks like all sorts of people, and same for mental health disorders. It can be any one of us. It can be. So I think, again, normalising it, because, every single one of us human beings have got the capability or the tendency to fall down sometimes, and just really helping pick each other up. They have this whole saying here in Australia, they might have said it in NZ, but it's, we're in this together, and a lot of people poo-poo it, but it's just a nice reminder, because the pandemic has shown that. Like, we're looking at people's celebrities' lounge rooms, their books, they're normal people, they've got their kids running in. We're in this together. Now more than ever, the pandemic has shown us that the whole globe is completely connected. We are one. We are all human beings in this together. We've all got a responsibility to ourselves, but each other. Yeah. It's just, there's been some real gems around it, and I'm really holding that for my family and myself, because, it's difficult in winter and what have you, just being locked in. So just really actually acknowledging those little gems in this, really important.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to chat about? Anything else that you think we need to learn about?
I think I'm I think we've spoken a lot about everything.
Yeah, we've covered a lot
Yeah,
of topics, which is
yeah,
great, or at least
yeah.
given people some insight into what you know about, which is great. And
Mm,
the big thing is knowing, for me, knowing the different therapists out there and what their personal experience has been
mm,
and what your area of interest is as well, particularly with mental health. I know some practitioners find it very draining and
mm,
very difficult to deal with and find it hard not to pass judgment.
yeah,
And as a client, you feel that when someone's not
yeah,
comfortable with what they're dealing
yeah,
with. I
yeah.
don't actually know many naturopaths who like openly advertise about mental health
Mm.
and how they support.
It's a shame, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah.
So, where can people find you online?
Um, yeah, so my website is juliesema.com or .com.au. My book, Your Body is Your Teacher, is also got its own little website, points back to my website. My Facebook page is Healthy Inside, and I'm on Insta as well. And all my other contacts are there. But my clinic is in Heidelberg, in Victoria and Melbourne. And that's where I run my little groups as well too. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
That's great. I'll pop those details in the podcast notes so people can reach out and find you. And did you say, well, when we're out of lockdown, are you going to be running another group?
That's right. Yeah. So it's for chronic health condition. Well, for those who are suffering with a chronic health condition, but also their loved ones and families. So I know a couple of people who have children with disabilities. I live with a partner who has type 1 diabetes, and it's a big thing. It's a big thing to live with somebody who has a chronic condition, and so it's a very informal, but for those people who have a condition that they have to live with every day, or someone like myself who has somebody in their family, in their household, normalising it, some good resources, cups of tea, evening chats, really just about connecting. Because when we're connected, we don't feel so odd, so alone, and it just makes things so much easier.
Yeah.
But really looking forward to when we can get out of lockdown. It's not something that I can really run online,
Mhm.
but it's very informal. It's a free group, and there's so many people that live with chronic health conditions, whether it is diabetes, obesity, depression, whatever it is, and it can be so many people living with, they've so-called succeeded or overcome cancer, but they're still living with it. So that's another big one as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's really great of you to do something like that.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
goes
I think it's
well.
important. Yeah,
And everyone should just connect with you to find out when that starts running again.
that's right. Yeah, we did marked it for August, but our lockdown now doesn't finish till the 19th, so we're just waiting to see. And of course, there'll be all the guidelines in terms of social distancing and cleansing and masks if required here in Vic. We're just waiting to see. Yeah, ticking all those boxes,
Yeah.
keeping everyone safe.
Good on you. All right. I'll ask you a few questions just to wrap up. You can just answer with one word or one short
Okay.
sentence. That's
Yeah,
fine.
cool.
What are you grateful for?
My body. I don't make it wrong, and I thank it every day for working, bringing me here every day.
Nice.
Yeah.
What's your favourite book that you would recommend?
Yeah. I
Apart
love the
from your
Tibet.
own.
Yeah, that's right. I love the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, because death is something we all, obviously experience, but it's not about that. It's, there's many deaths in every day, and it's about embracing living, and I just love it. It has some real ancient wisdom in there, but some very practical tips as well. It's a beautiful book. Don't be scared of it. Don't be scared of the title.
Cool.
Mm.
And for everyone in lockdown who's probably binging on Netflix, what's your movie recommendation?
I only just saw it recently, but I'd read the book a long time ago. The film Lion, about the boy in India who, is adopted out to a Tasmanian family, and he retraces his true family, and it just gave me the whole reiterate that sense of identity, belonging, and his determination just to find his people again. It was quite amazing, and it was very well filmed, and the acting was superb, and it's beautiful to watch India as well. It's such a magical country.
It is a good one, and it's great if you need a bit of a cry.
Yeah, it's very heartbreaking, but very warming and positive as well, and a true story. I love true stories, real people.
Cool. Who is an inspirational person to you and why?
Anyone living with a disability or ability, I really get inspired by those people because I know what it's like to be partially paralysed, and I just think anybody who overcomes, whether it's blindness or some kind of immobilization, are quite remarkable human beings. We have a lot to learn from them.
Yeah, that mind over matter.
Amazing.
What's something that you think everyone should try?
I think meditation is absolutely worth a try for every single person. As a stress management tool, there's so many easy mindfulness, YouTubes and things you can watch or listen to and click into. It can even be just, 10 minutes a day. But it really just reminds us that we are powerful, that we have a calm center. It helps with our breath and our grounding and that we're not our ego. We're not these negative thoughts that are in our brain, and we just have so much capacity of light in us. I just think it's really worth a try, no matter how busy you are.
Do you meditate regularly?
I do, yeah.
Very good.
Try to.
Yeah.
Not perfect.
Even if it's just a few minutes, that's
absolutely.
Fine. Or even if it's a few times a week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. And what do you think people could embrace to live a more fulfilled life?
I think just my quote, you don't need to be sick to get better, because even if we don't have a particular condition right now, there's always opportunity for us to grow and be better versions of ourselves. And, we're here now. And for me, every day is precious. I've lost a dear one suddenly, like literally overnight. He's gone, all our future dreams and plans and parenting together. And today counts. So just do whatever it takes to be your best version of yourself and love who you are, and don't make your body wrong.
Where do you see yourself heading? This is an extra question.
I just want to continue really making a difference in my community. I would love for my group to grow, and I had quite a few book speaking engagements lined up before the pandemic hit. I ride my horse, so I'd love to just keep riding my horse and travel again. But my biggest hope is just to keep helping other people with mental health issues, because you're not alone.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jen. It's lovely to speak with you. Real pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to today's Pain Story interview on the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. Anything shared during this episode is for information only. It does not replace professional advice from a healthcare practitioner. If you are experiencing pain, injury, or illness, seek advice that is catered to your individual needs. Thanks for learning with me on the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. If you like what you've heard, I would love if you could rate, review, and share with your friends. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. My handle is The Art of Listening to Your Body. You can join my free Facebook group where I go live regularly to teach you about different conditions and the deeper underlying emotions at play.